Today, we're cracking into a case that's going to make your blood boil. The Department of Justice has just dropped a bombshell report on the Phoenix Police Department, and folks, it's a masterclass in how not to respect the Constitution. We're talking about the First Amendment, the cornerstone of American democracy, the right to speak out, protest, and hold the powerful accountable. But what happens when those that are supposed to protect those rights decide to stomp all over them instead? What happens when the very people entrusted to uphold the law turn it into a weapon against the public? That's exactly what's going down in Phoenix, and the recent Department of Justice findings are a brutal wake-up call. But it doesn't just stop there. This isn't just about one or two overzealous officers making a mistake. Oh no, this is about an entire police department that has systematically targeted protesters, arrested citizens on trumped-up charges, and retaliated against anyone daring to record their actions. It's a tale of power run amok, when the First Amendment is treated like an inconvenience rather than a sacred right. And as we peel back the layers of this report, we're going to see just how deep the rot goes. How Phoenix PD's actions aren't just reckless, they're unconstitutional. So buckle up, because we're about to take a no-holds-barred look at how Phoenix PD has turned the First Amendment into their personal punching bag. The DOJ investigation into the Phoenix Police Department reveals a disturbing pattern of behavior that smacks right up against the First Amendment. You see, the Phoenix police didn't just cross the line, they took a bulldozer to it. From cracking down on peaceful protesters to arresting people simply for recording their actions on their own phones, this report paints a picture of a police force that seems to have forgotten what country they're in. And it's not just a one-off incident here and there. According to the DOJ, it's a systematic issue that permeates the entire department's approach to law enforcement. But let's not just throw around general accusations. Let's break this down and see exactly where Phoenix PD went off the rails and why their actions aren't just wrong, but also unconstitutional. Imagine you're at a peaceful protest, exercising your right to speak out against the government, and suddenly you're met with a barrage of tear gas and rubber bullets. Apparently, welcome to Phoenix, where the First Amendment takes a back seat to brute force. The DOJ's report highlights how Phoenix PD has been using force indiscriminately against protesters, and not just any force, less lethal munitions, tear gas, rubber bullets, apparently, you name it. The First Amendment is pretty clear. The government can't suppress speech just because it's inconvenient or uncomfortable. Yet Phoenix PD's approach to crowd control makes it more seem like government suppression. These actions aren't just heavy-handed, they're illegal. The Supreme Court has consistently ruled the government must tread lightly when it comes to regulating speech, especially in public forums like protests. But the Phoenix PD didn't just tread. They stomped all over those rights with their jackboots, making it clear that they were more interested in shutting down dissent than protecting the constitutional rights of their citizens. Now, if you think that's bad, just wait till you hear about the arrests. Because Phoenix PD didn't just stop at using force, they took it a step further, locking people up on flimsy charges. So you've been gassed, shot at with rubber bullets, and now, as if that wasn't enough, you've been cuffed and hauled to jail. Why? Because you dared to protest in Phoenix. The DOJ report is scathing in its assessment of how Phoenix PD has been arresting protesters without cause. We're talking about arrests made on unsupported allegations, charges that wouldn't hold up for a second against any real scrutiny. The law requires that arrests be made on probable cause, meaning that there must be a reasonable belief that a person's committed a crime. But for Phoenix PD, they seem to think that probable cause is just a suggestion. For example, the report details how protesters were arrested for failure to disperse, even when they were complying with police orders or simply standing by and observing. It's as if Phoenix PD believes that merely showing up at a protest is a crime itself. That isn't just sloppy policing, it's a blatant violation of the core of the First Amendment. The courts have made crystal clear that you can't arrest someone just because they're exercising their right to freedom of speech. Yet that's exactly what Phoenix PD has been doing, turning the First Amendment into a farce. And if you think that's the end of it, buckle up, because Phoenix PD's disregard for the First Amendment doesn't stop with protesters. It extended to anyone who dared to pull out their phones and hit that record button. You see something, you say something. Or in this day and age, you record something. But in Phoenix, apparently that alone was enough to get you slapped into cuffs. The DOJ report didn't mince words when it came to Phoenix PD's hostility towards people recording their actions. Now, let's be clear. The courts across the country have repeatedly upheld the right to record public officials in public places, including police officers, as long as they're performing their duties in public spaces where there's no expectation of privacy. This is a key component of accountability, a way for the public to keep check on governmental power. But Phoenix PD, they seem to think they're above all that. The report details incidents where people were arrested simply for recording police activity. No interference, no obstruction, just standing there recording. The courts have ruled in cases across this nation that this kind of recording is protected under the First Amendment. Yet Phoenix PD has been treating it like a criminal act. This isn't just a mistake, it's a deliberate attempt to silence the public and shield their actions from scrutiny. So what happens when a police department systematically ignores the First Amendment? It's not just the individuals who suffer, it's an entire community that loses trust in the very institutions meant to protect them. You'd think after all these incidences, someone at Phoenix PD might say to themselves, hey, maybe we should take a step back and think about the Constitution. But nope, apparently in Phoenix, it was business as usual, and that's where the real problem lies. The DOJ's report isn't just about individual bad actors. It's about the systematic failure within Phoenix PD to protect the First Amendment. The lack of proper training, absence of clear policies, and total failure in supervision have all contributed to a culture in which officers feel empowered to act with impunity. And why not? When there have been no consequences thus far for trampling on constitutional rights, why bother respecting them? This report makes clear that this is a department that has failed at every level to uphold the rights enshrined in the First Amendment. The policies, or lack thereof, at Phoenix PD have created an environment where violations of free speech are not just possible, but inevitable. But don't take my word for it. The evidence is all laid out in the DOJ's report, and it paints a damning picture of the police department that's lost control and is out of touch with the Constitution and its own citizens. Let's get into the nitty-gritty legal details, because if there's one thing we love here at Uncivil Law, it's diving into the law and showing you exactly why Phoenix PD's actions are indefensible. The First Amendment violations laid out in the DOJ report aren't just minor infractions. They are repeated, systematic, and ongoing serious breaches of constitutional law. When the government suppresses speech based on its content, it's treading on the most sacred ground of constitutional protections. The courts have consistently applied strict scrutiny to any governmental action that discriminates based on the content of the speech, meaning the government, in order to try to deal with it, must show a compelling interest, and the actions are narrowly tailored to achieve that interest. Phoenix PD's actions don't even come close to meeting this serious standard. Using force against peaceful protesters, arresting people without probable cause, and retaliating against those who record police activities, these are all actions that violate the core First Amendment principles. The Supreme Court has made clear in cases like Cohen versus California, the government cannot regulate speech just because it doesn't like what's being said. Yet that's exactly what the Phoenix PD have been doing, regulating speech through fear, force, and intimidation. The DOJ report documents real people whose lives were trampled on, all because Phoenix PD decided the First Amendment did not apply to them. So what's the fallout from all this? Well, for starters, the entire Phoenix Police Department is facing some serious legal scrutiny from the federal government. But more importantly, they're losing the trust of the very people they're supposed to protect. The DOJ report doesn't just detail violations. It also makes clear that these actions have real consequences. When a police department systematically violates the First Amendment, it erodes public trust, damages community relation, and creates a climate of fear. And let's be honest, once that trust is lost, it can be very difficult to regain. Phoenix PD's regard for the First Amendment isn't just a legal issue, it's also a moral issue. They've shown a complete lack of respect for the rights of the people they're supposed to serve, and that's something that should concern everyone, regardless of where you stand on the political spectrum. Because at the end of the day, if our rights aren't protected, what's left? And with that, we conclude our initial look into the Phoenix Police Department, but don't worry, we're not done yet. There will be a lot more to unpack from this DOJ report, and you can better believe we'll be here to break it down as things develop. Now, let me leave you with a few questions, because trust me, there's a lot to chew on here. First, do you think the Phoenix PD skipped that day they taught Constitution Police Academy, or did they just decide it didn't apply to them? Second, when did recording public servants in action in a public place become an arrestable offense? Did I just miss the memo, or did they make that up? And finally, do you think Phoenix PD's approach to free speech is more public safety or public suppression? I'm dying to hear your thoughts, so drop your thoughts in the comment section below. I know you'll have some opinions on this one. Until next time, I've been Uncivil Law, and remember to keep it uncivil out there.